Hello there, I'm Reeve. I am a student hoping to create environment assets in the games industry. I have skills in many core industry programs including 3ds Max, ZBrush, Photoshop, Substance Painter, and Unreal Engine, amongst many others. To see examples of my work, you can visit my website at aaronreeve2.wixsite.com/aaronreeve. Here I have all of my completed and in production projects, as well as more information about myself and links to all of my social media pages, including LinkedIn, ArtStation, and Twitter. In this screencast, I will be talking in depth about a project I recently completed as a part of my bachelor's degree in games design at Sheffield Hallam University. The aim of this project was to improve and develop our skills in a particular discipline of our choosing. For the project, I chose to focus on three fundamental areas: my high poly sculpting in ZBrush, my low poly modeling in 3ds Max, and texturing in Substance Painter. Since this was my first time using Substance Painter, it was also very useful as a learning experience. I decided that I wanted to use the theme of a Victorian study. This gave me a lot of chance to add finer details to the sculpts, and also use many different materials to work with, such as wood, leather, metal, and ceramic. Since I wanted to have a large variety, I planned a list of assets with varying materials, and then created a quick photo bash in Photoshop to get an idea of how it would look. I will now walk through the workflow that I use when approaching each asset. I began the workflow of each asset in 3ds Max by creating a low poly model for scale and proportion. The complexity of the model depended on how much it was going to be sculpted. For example, the chair's initial model was extremely blocky and mainly used for getting the basic shape and proportions I wanted. In contrast, much of the table and candelabra didn't need sculpting, and so they remained as they were. Once the low poly had been completed, the models were then imported into ZBrush for sculpting. It's here that I added a lot of all the fine detail and filigree to the assets. For this, I used alphas with Victorian-style floral patterns to mask out where I wanted them. With just a few variations of alphas, it was relatively easy to create convincing and interesting chains of detail. One downside to this was the individual pieces needed to have fairly high poly counts for the alphas to transfer nicely. Should they be too low, the masks came out pixelated and gave subpar results. With sculpting done, it was back to 3ds Max for retopology, unwrapping, and setting up texture sets. I tried to be as efficient as possible with both topology and unwrapping. To do this, parts that appeared multiple times, such as the arms of the candelabra and the legs of the table, used the same UV space, allowing me to make them bigger and improve the texture quality in those areas. The downside to this was that each part looked the same, which made texturing slightly more difficult. For texturing and baking, I decided to use Substance Painter. It's a program I'd never used before, but it gets used a lot professionally and it seemed wise to integrate it into my workflow. I had previous experience with Substance Designer and Photoshop, so I quickly picked up the basics of the program. When baking the high poly sculpts to the low poly meshes, I encountered very few problems. The bakes came out near perfect first time, and I needed slight adjustments to fix some small errors. The program made it extremely easy to create convincing textures. Using the layer system with generators and masks, edgeware, dirt, and grunge could be easily added and adjusted, making the assets seem more realistic. However, due to the previously mentioned overlapping UVs, I had to make sure any grunge or scratches did not make the mirroring obvious. The last step was preparing the final render. This was done in Marmoset Toolbag to light the assets in a realistic manner. I added orange lights to the scene to imitate the candle light and a fireplace off screen. Here a lot of tweaks and changes happened, as seeing all of the assets together brought several problems to light. Colours were changed, roughness values adjusted, assets changed in size. I desaturated the camera, added fog and grain to give the scene a more vintage look to fit the theme, and the scene was done. In the end, this project helped me develop my skills as an artist, fine-tuning my understanding of a production workflow, and giving me the skills needed to take on any part of creating an asset. That concludes my breakdown of the workflow behind these assets. If you'd like to see more technical breakdowns of this project, as well as some of my other work, everything can be found on my website at aaronreeve2.wixsite.com/aaronreeve, or you can visit my ArtStation. I can also be reached by email at aaronreeve@sky.com, through Twitter or LinkedIn. Links to all of these can be found on my website. Thank you for watching.